No, I wasn't recording. Okay, so good thing I checked. So I'll start over. The soul is embodied. The soul is embodied, which is just another way to say the soul exists within the context of the body. Few things could be more obvious, I suppose. However, for some of us, the soul and the body are in cahoots might be a title that is closer to the truth. I have the distinct impression that my soul and my body are connected in ways I did not imagine, and at times seem to gang up on me without my permission. In the summer of 2008, in the middle of the last weekend of my coaching program, I was in turmoil following a bit of experiential learning, during which we were supposed to mix with each other and practice delivering our 30-second elevator speech, describing our approach to coaching. I was intimidated by this exercise because since I was in the midst of professional burnout as a therapist and had gone to coaching training as a way to rescue my career from vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, I didn't have an elevator speech that made any sense. I remember feeling acutely distressed, insecure, and a little bit hopeless that day. Despite this, after the exercise, one of my conversation partners confessed she felt intimidated by me, as she normally is, she said, in the presence of powerful women. She actually said powerful women, referring to me. That's very strange, I thought, because precisely then I had been feeling very small indeed and decidedly powerless, in part due to being in her presence, her young, smart, and beautiful presence, that is. Feeling small and powerless has been a very familiar, very painful state of being, a bad mental neighborhood I wander into from time to time. I was solidly in that neighborhood at the exact same time my conversation partner was feeling intimidated. How could this be? How could I, in the midst of feeling very small and powerless, actually intimidate another woman and not be the slightest bit aware? I sensed a bout of psychological vertigo coming on. During the break, I caught up with one of my coaches and a friend in the hallway, both of whom noticed my obvious distress. As I related, with tears, mind you, how small and powerless and frustrated I was feeling, instead of getting the sympathy and support I wanted, my friend Don shook his head and said, "I'm not buying it." I'm sorry, what? This conversation was not going the way I intended. He looked me in the eye. We are roughly the same height, yet I undoubtedly outweighed him. And he said, "Your body is telling a very different story." I wanted to say, well, my body doesn't know what the hell it's talking about, but I was incapable of speech, stopped in my tracks. After a few beats of shock, embarrassment, and incredulity, I suddenly realized the point my friend was trying to make. My body is large, occupying a considerable amount of space, and apparently has a story of its own to tell, one of power and substance, presence, and authority. Inside my mind, however, I was believing that old familiar tale that I am powerless, small, and hopelessly insecure. The disparity between the story I constantly tell myself and the one my body is telling the world illustrates a common dilemma for many of us. We simply do not feel at home in our own bodies, much less connected to our bodies in a loving way, and even less ready to tune into the body's soulful wisdom. Yet I believe that the soul and the body are connected in fundamental ways, much to my chagrin, because, of course, I should have known. In the early 2000s, I became a member of a unique type of yoga center. This was another example of how the soul can lead you strangely, because from the moment I saw the brochure for this center in my colleague's waiting room, I felt a strong impulse to check it out. The man who managed this particular center soon took a special interest in me. And during the time I was a member there, I had several interactions with him that illustrate how the body/soul can go out of its way to speak to us in powerful, if unconventional ways. The first interaction came after I'd been attending for a while. He observed me joking around with some of the other members and afterward approached me and said, "I think I misunderstood your personality. I used to think you a very calm person. Now I think your true nature joyful." Your true nature joyful. That's how he talks. your true nature joyful, but you make yourself calm. This make your body very sad. My true nature is joyful, but I make myself calm, and this makes my body very sad. It does indeed, sir. It does indeed. The second encounter came during what he called an energy check, in which he would press gently on certain pressure points to see if anything needs attention. As he pressed a certain point under my left collarbone, I cried out in pain. Ah, he said, you have a problem with a coworker. It shocked me for two reasons. One, because I did indeed have a problem with a coworker, a big problem, a problem that had me in considerable distress. And two, somehow my body told him quite against my will. Tell me, he said. When I described the particular conflict I was having with my coworker, he said, you have to fight. And when I just, oh no, I said, as I tried to think of a way to explain how intimidated I felt by this person with whom I was having the problem, and how averse I was to conflict in a way that he might understand given our language differences. So I said, in a fight, she's like a lion, and I am like a chicken. He looked me in the eye with all seriousness and pointed his finger at me. Even chicken knows how to fight for her chicks. You must fight like a chicken for your soul. Just like that, I swear to God. His words landed on me like the voice of God. And so I did. I fought like a chicken, got some power back, and put myself on a course to hold my own in relationship with this person. All because my body had a story to tell that my mind had no intention of divulging. My body, by some seemingly random chance, managed to tell its story to the right person at precisely the right time. I can only conclude that my soul directed me to join the studio at which I would meet a man who could listen to my body in a way that could get me the help I didn't know I needed at just the right time. Could this be true? Have my soul and my body been in cahoots the whole time? In preparation for writing this chapter, in lieu of knowing what the heck I'm talking about, I sat down with my journal and quickly reviewed the history of my struggles with my body from as early as I could remember. I did this in lieu of actually knowing something about the soul's connection with the body, but I figured I should start somewhere. It wasn't pretty. Here are some highlights, or if you prefer, lowlights. From the beginning, I was described by my mother with no malice or embarrassment on her part as big for her age. At 5 years old, I experienced the aforementioned too big to play incident, and if you weren't here, it's a big long story about that. In elementary school, I was always the tallest girl in my grade, so I stood on the risers next to the tallest boy in our grade, always. I quickly became very aware that big and boy go together in a way that big and girl do not. I was chubby during my elementary school years and teased mercilessly at home by my brothers. Physical education was rough, especially the habit of weighing and measuring each child at the beginning and end of the year. Is that like an old thing, or does that do they still do that? It's a really old thing. Thank God. So you stand in line in front of that scale, right, and the measure. Okay. At the age of 11, I watched my gym teacher move the 100-pound weight on the scale into its place on the bar, while the other kids stood in line behind me, wide-eyed. Horrors. At the end of 6th grade, I was very much a child in an adult's body, at 5 foot 5 inches and 135 pounds. 7th grade was pure torture. I experienced a growth spurt in preparation for the onset of menses, a whole new world of horrors. I was desperately hungry all the time and was outgrowing my clothes at an alarming rate. Additional junior high horrors include, but are not limited to, fat rolls, gym clothes, gang showers, also sweating and pimples and greasy hair. Humiliations galore. In 7th grade, I stopped looking in the mirror, except for my face, which I thought was bad enough. Eventually, I began dieting. The summer after 8th grade, I went on my first diet, Dr. Stillman's water diet, which consisted of nothing but animal protein and water. My mother put a stop to that nonsense after I passed out on the bathroom floor, but not before I had lost 15 pounds. Worth it, I thought. Other diets to which I have subjected myself through the years include fasting, ostensibly for spiritual purposes, but hey, does it hurt to lose a few pounds in the process? The all-Chinese food diet, all those vegetables, you know. The nothing but bread diet, a bust. I can eat a lot of bread. The low-calorie diet, 1,200 calories a day from my 5', 10.5-inch frame left me feeling dizzy and hungry all the time. But it worked. I became gloriously thin. Not to worry, I gained it all back and so much more. Weight Watchers in the 80s helped me reach my goal weight for about 15 minutes. Eventually, exhausted and discouraged by the whole dieting game, I went on the anti-diet, How to Become Naturally Thin by Eating More. This is like the title of the book. The only rule of this diet is never to go more than 5 minutes past your hunger before eating something healthy and stopping when you are full. Supposedly, this helps your body learn to trust you and settle itself down. This idea, plus an inherited thyroid fail that seems to happen to my people in their 30s, and within 6 months, I'd gained 60 pounds. I was now obese. From there, I took on the Atkins diet, the Schwarzbein diet, the paleo diet, the low-carb diet again, and many other homegrown weight loss schemes. In true believer fashion, I also launched the overeating is a sin, so pray about it daily method until it started to make me crazy. Eventually, I concluded, note to self, for sanity's sake, don't mix food with religion. Oh. Since those days, literally hundreds of pounds have been lost and gained, lost again and gained again. Sigh. I share these rather depressing memories to illustrate just one way in which one person can so thoroughly fall out of a relationship with her body that she feels like a virtual stranger inside of it. I share my experiences not because they are extreme. In fact, my experiences are very common and well short of the suffering that millions are currently experiencing in the throes of various types of eating disorders. In addition, are the millions of others who at this moment are suffering many other kinds of body issues. The realms of gender, race, sexuality, disability, disease, trauma, and birth defects offer human beings the opportunity to experience high levels of distress and dis-ease inside their own bodies. My challenges have been mild compared to theirs. Oh, and by the way, please don't think that the beautiful people are immune from self-inflicted suffering. Just ask one of them what goes on in their head on a daily basis, or the lengths some of them are willing to go in order to maintain their culturally acceptable shape. You might be shocked to discover that opposing one's body does not depend on actually being fat. Body shame is a cultural disease, an equal opportunity infection, and one that is not easily cured. My dislike of my own body drove me to discover ways to tolerate being inside of it, but separate from it at the same time. No one can tolerate the feeling of self-conscious shame for long, so I learned to create a reality apart from the pesky, oversized, out-of-control mass of flesh and bone that carried me to and fro. This interior world helped me value other parts of myself in order to compensate for all the bad feelings I felt having to live inside my own body. I was taught to separate myself from my body, and so were you, I'll wager. Religious leaders taught me that the body is just an earth-bound vessel for a heaven-bound spirit. What a relief, I thought, as I imagined a day when I could chuck this inferior body and take up the glorious spirit body I was always meant to have forever in heaven. Yes, they taught me the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit and that I should take care of it. And perhaps I should have picked up a clue from the story about God becoming flesh and walking around in a human body. A lot could be learned by pondering this idea. Nevertheless, the vibe I chose to adopt was one of disdain for the flesh, distrust of the body due to its propensity to sin, and the superiority of the spirit, mind, soul in comparison. My faith offered me a way to escape the angst of living inside the body I was given. Fast forward now to 2012 or so. It might be 2011, I'm not sure. Somehow I had made it through my acute spiritual crisis, had reformed my counseling practice in order to ameliorate burnout and set myself up to avoid such a crash in the future, and had managed to get off the antidepressants I'd been using to keep me out of the darkness. But I was still mildly depressed, feeling generally blah, plodding through life, relieved to be hovering just above the line of total misery. I also had accumulated several minor but annoying physical complaints I wanted to deal with, but had no confidence in the medical profession to figure it out correctly. That's when I made an appointment with an acupuncturist. There I laid out my annoying complaints: fatigue, sleep disturbance, mild depression, skin problems, digestive problems, weight problems, memory problems, as well as miscellaneous aches and pains. I had no expectation or hope that acupuncture would do me any good, but I had nowhere else to go. My acupuncturist, Judy, took my history, set the needles, and left me alone for 20 minutes. I felt nothing, but agreed to come back in 2 weeks. At my next appointment, she asked me if I had anything to add to the history I had given her last time. Well, I said, I have been through a significant faith crisis in the last several years. Tell me, she said. And after I poured out my story, she said, every one of your health issues has everything to do with what you've just told me. And then she went to work with her needles. This time I definitely felt something. When she asked me to imagine a safe and healing place, I imagined laying myself down at the foot of a massive tree and being absorbed into the earth, receiving nutrients directly from the soil just as a tree does. The dull heaviness left me, and I felt life seeping into me instead. As I drove home, I had the strong conviction that she may have just saved my life. I had the distinct impression that if I hadn't gone to acupuncture, I may well have settled into the kind of stagnation that could have resulted in a more serious illness, resulting in an early death. I went home and wept with the first bit of hope I had felt in a long time. I don't pretend to know how 5-element acupuncture works, but I do know it's based on an ancient understanding of the wholeness of being. Body, heart, mind, soul, and spirit are designed to flow together to produce wholeness and health throughout our entire being. The life force, or chi, when brought into balance, is free to bring harmony and health to the entire person. This medicine is 5,000 years old. 5,000 years ago, Chinese practitioners developed a system of healing that treats the whole person. Our modern system of medicine, as powerful as it is, often overlooks or misses entirely this sense of wholeness and interdependency. With regular treatments over the next several months, my vitality returned and my health improved significantly, all because my acupuncturist knew how the heartbreak of my faith crisis had messed up my whole system, body and soul. Today, I feel alive, optimistic, and whole, as opposed to resigned, frustrated, and sick, because she knows in very skilled and specific ways how the soul and the body are in cahoots. For a perfect moment on a perfect day last September, feeling the joy I normally experience riding my bike down the trail by my house, I not only felt the joy, I noticed that I was a self experiencing joy, and that the joy encompassed my whole being. Not just the emotion of joy, which I felt in my heart, or the accomplishment of the ride, which I noted in my mind, or even the sensation of energy pumping through my body as I sailed down the trail. All the elements of the experience, heart, mind, and body, combined to express profound delight about the entirety of my life, my all-encompassing soul, in that one moment in time. My soul was expressing delight through my body, and that's when I knew it. That's when I heard the words in my mind. The soul is embodied. At that moment, I realized I had lived most of my life with an image of my soul living in a little chamber deep in my brain, being carried around in a body whose only function was to serve as a very sophisticated carriage for my soul, like royalty being carried along in a sedan chair hoisted by half a dozen slaves. In that image, the soul remains encased in its chamber, unsullied by the lowly flesh of my body, insulated from contact with the real world. That day in September, I instead imagined a soul infusing every cell of my body, but also encompassing it, extending beyond the confines of my skin in a very interesting way. I don't know how the soul is embodied. No one does. We do not yet possess the technology to document these things. I can't tell you how it works, and neither can anyone else with any scientifically accepted certainty. So what should we do? We could wait for a hard evidence and continue to try to live separately from our bodies. On the other end of the spectrum, we could decide for ourselves how it works and try to steer ourselves into one of hundreds of ideas about the spiritual nature of the body, trusting ourselves to alternative practices with abandon and take our chances. We could all go to 5-element acupuncture and reap whatever benefits it may bring. You're welcome to try any of the above. But remember, I don't know how it works, so I can only vouch for what works for me. Or I could decide that I don't need to know how it works. I just need to know that it's more than likely true. If I know that my soul and my body communicate, abide in the same place, that my soul possibly infuses itself in and through my body, then I can listen more skillfully to what my soul is saying through my body. I can also take care of my body as if I'm taking care of my very soul. I can bring reverence and care and compassion to my body at the same level that I bring to my soul. This can only be good for me, and it may make all the difference in how I live my life. So this is my current plan. Let the idea that my soul is embodied be declared truth in my mind, and then act as if it's true. Begin to care for my body with love, compassion, and reverence. Listen to my body's signals and try to learn its language. Attend to the sensations of my body as a source of valuable information, and make an intention to correctly interpret them for my benefit. I can be an experiential learner, a truster of my body, a cooperator with my soul in this way. But I also plan to sit with all the ways I resist doing this, all the times I eat badly or neglect to stretch and strengthen my muscles, all the times I refuse rest and ignore requests to hydrate, pamper, and nourish. Because I do resist every day. For all the listening I do to my soul through my heart, my mind, and my intuition, I turn a deaf ear to my body most days. I want to correct this. I want to make my body my teacher, to sit at its feet and learn its wisdom, to acquire the language of presence and wholeness inside my own flesh, my own soul. But I'm new at this, so I'll keep you posted. In the meantime, lest we think we can master the soul with a think and a plan, here's Mary Oliver with her poem called Bone. Understand, I'm always trying to figure out what the soul is, and where hidden, and what shape. And so last week when I found on the beach the ear bone of a pilot whale that may have died hundreds of years ago, I thought maybe I was close to discovering something. For the ear bone is the portion that lasts longest in any of us, man or whale, shaped like a squat spoon with a pink scoop where once, in the lively swimmer's head, it joined its two sisters in the house of hearing. It was only 2 inches long, and I thought, the soul might be like this, so hard, so necessary, yet almost nothing. Beside me, the gray sea was opening and shutting its wave doors, unfolding over and over, its time-ridiculing roar. I looked, but I couldn't see anything through its dark-knit glare. Yet, don't we know the golden sand is there at the bottom? Though our eyes have never seen it, nor can our hands ever catch it, lest we would sift it down into fractions and facts and certainties. And what the soul is, also I believe I will never quite know. Though I play at the edges of knowing, truly I know our part is not knowing, but looking and touching and loving, which is the way I walked on softly through the pale pink morning light. Always end with Mary Oliver. You can't go wrong. So, like, I just want to open for conversation, and like I tell everybody every time, I'm more interested in the interaction of the concepts and the ideas and your own personal kind of experience with some of these things that I'm illustrating than anything else. So, ready, set, go.
You spoke about it already, but could you just now, when it's fresh in our mind, remind us the other words that can be used in place of the word soul?
Other words that could be used in place of soul. Higher self, true self, authentic self, just self, I suppose, even. Anybody else have one that they like better?
Our original being.
Original being, yeah.
Essence?
Our essence, yeah, that's a good one. Which is really weird. It's a strange thing, when we're trying to talk about these things. It would be nice if we knew what the hell it was, right? We could kind of go, oh, yeah, there it is, or that we could see it, or that we could kind of, and in particular, in this issue about the soul and the body together somehow, how does it work? I mean, the best fill in the blank for me was it infuses. So when I was riding my bike and I had this perfect moment on this perfect day, and I kind of saw the whole of it, I had this kind of vague image of some spirit-like substance, I guess, that didn't just live, like I said, in a little chamber behind my nose, but it just kind of infused everything. But that was just an image I had, and I liked that word infused because it sort of feels like it's in everything and kind of at one with everything, but it still feels kind of inadequate to me.
It's interesting because when you started, before you were reading, the word that came to me about the soul was envelopes.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to write some of these down because...
Part of it was because as you were talking about it, I was rethinking the experience that I had. And yes, Mary Oliver played a part in it too. It was in the fall of 2015, and I've been doing a lot of walking at that point. I've been listening to a lot of On Being podcasts. And I'd really been struggling with a lot of, what does that all mean? Where does it all come? And I had, she was interviewing Mary Oliver on one of my walks, and it was towards late October, and I had Axel and my dog, and really she had Mary Oliver read The Wild Geese.
Oh, yeah.
As I came around the bend of a sunset of a pond with geese taking off, and it really, there was a thing that was really powerful about it, and whatever. And Axel passed away very suddenly about 2 weeks later. And, it was very hard, and it was hard for me to walk again in some ways along some of those paths. And it took until spring to kind of be able to walk, and do it. And literally, again, I was coming down around another part of our walks, a different pond, and it just hit me in terms of that perfect moment of feeling like, well, Axel's here, he peed on this tree. kept turning green, and there was just this, I don't, it's hard to explain,
Yeah.
but yet it also felt so satisfying, and just to feel like I was whole with it all. And that really, it's there, but you don't feel that every day
Yeah.
in that sense, but it feels like there's a hope.
That's just a beautiful story. Yeah, thank you. Any other? I think it's an experiential kind of learning. I think we have to get it from the bottom up to understand these things. So wondering if you, as I was, I pretty much just spewed out not all the worst things about my relationship with my body. I'm reserving some of those for shame's sake, but some pretty rotten ones. But mostly just to kind of evoke our own relationship with our own body and how that whole, what could be more simple or more elemental, but how could it be any more complicated or, frustrating for some of us? And anytime I see those two things in juxtaposition, something that's really natural and elemental and with how much we struggle with it, I think there's a clue there somehow. Something about this is really important, and pressing through those bad experiences and remembering those moments when your soul kind of popped up and said hello through your body, is a good one. So
I kind of like the idea that, like you put, the soul infuses the body, but then you're talking about like the relationship between the two and how oftentimes there's such a big gap, and that really it can kind of go both ways. The body also infuses the soul,
yeah,
the soul infuses the body, and like that kind of creates this symbiosis of connection between the two that you're kind of learning to pull from both to kind of like get to the center.
yeah, that's such a great way to put that, because actually, you needed to say that because I needed to say that too. It really is, these two things are things, these two entities are in tandem, like they work in ways that, and me just saying the soul infuses the body, it just reveals my prejudice, right? That, oh, the soul is the thing and the body is lucky to have it, kind of thing. But this other, the body infuses the soul or is part of the soul in some way, is, needs to be at least said, even if we don't know how it works or what it means.
Got to change the title of your chapter now. It's got to be The Body is Ensouled.
The body is ensouled. Yeah. I'm going to write that down.
I've wrestled with, as part of that faith system of Catholicism and the physical body, and the ideal of the spirit and the spiritual existence, and that at some point in time we won't have this physical body, and wrestling with, well then, what's going on with the story about God creating the physical world? Why did God create the physical world? If there's got to be something really important and special and meaningful about the physical existence that I hadn't really been recognizing or appreciating or something before. And so that whole bit that we're just talking about here through that, and how I put down the soul experiences the world through the body.
Okay.
And there's something about the physical experience, I think, that is really important and holy and special, and as valuable and meaningful as the spiritual and soulful piece of it.
Yeah. There've been a couple of movies, I think mostly in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, about, remember is it City of Angels with Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage, yeah. And I thought it was weird, so I don't remember all of it. But I just remember how dumb. Of course, an angel would never want to be mortal. You know, this was my thinking. You know, like, this is a dumb movie. So I might have to watch that again. But then there was another one with John Travolta. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, Michael?
Michael, yeah, he was supposedly Michael the Archangel. You should really go back and watch those and notice how stupid movies were in the 90s. But, which was kind of funny because, what? What's that?
I said two of my favorites.
Two of my favorites, yeah. But that one, I thought was interesting because he's supposedly the Archangel Michael, and he's got these gigantic wings, but he, and I don't know why he becomes mortal or how. Like, I don't get how that, I missed the plot element there. I just remember that he just wanted to be grubby and dirty and sexual and
And drink.
yeah, eat and drink, yeah, and all intemperate, all these glorious human things he wanted to experience, you know. And I always thought they were dumb. But I wonder, just what you just said, I have lately wondered too, like, if it really is all spirit and all knowing and all blissful and all, then what the hell? Like, what?
Why create this?
Why do we have this?
Why
You know?
is this, yeah. With all the aches and pains.
Yeah, and it doesn't work very well. Is another problem that I have. You know, it's like, okay, the mind of the great Almighty made this existence. You know, how in some ways it's like, why isn't it perfect? Why is it not blissful? Why is it not, you know, all of these things? I don't understand. I clearly don't. But that's a new thought for me. Like, oh, maybe we should get a clue from what's right in front of our face, that we kind of live in this incredibly complex system of life.
I had a thought that I think Dawn's story reminded me of a little bit, but mine would be the soul and the body share the same space. And not being a scientist, I'm fascinated when I hear explanations about the space between cells and atoms, and that there's more space in an atom than in the whole universe, and the distances of what the relationship between matter and the actual space between those particles of matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm less matter and more the space between my matter.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think about the connection with the whole fucking universe. That is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Because this particular collection of cells, for whatever reason, is holding together some of the kind of edge-pushing technology. Basically is that the cells that make up my body are, at most 7 years old or something like that, that I'm a completely different collection of matter than I was when I was born, half a century ago.
30 years ago.
And so just some of the thinking along that, and the fact that this collection of cells that I love, and that your dog was there because he peed on that tree, and the unity of all of those, it's kind of like I'm connected with China when I'm standing at the ocean, because because every cell in the ocean is connected with China, or the air that we share, or just some of that trippy stuff. I'm just like, we are all so connected, and it settles me down so that I can be in my body and my space and not so like trying to make things happen a certain way. But anyway, sharing the space is just,
Yeah. Plus, you kind of went over here too. So that the difference it makes is that you know that we're all connected.
connection, and it's just and instead of a drivenness, it has a calming effect too.
Settles you down.
Yeah, and I have an interesting visual which is completely related to that, which is at the atomic level, like you say, we are almost all space.
Yeah.
Not, we always think of water because we're always thinking in a very, atomic level, but we're almost all, we're just smoke. We're just wisps of smoke that hold together, and the life is what holds us together, but we're whiffs of smoke. And then what gets a little bit weirder than that is that if you, again, don't think of atoms, because we've learned there's lots of different kinds of atoms, but they're all made up of proton, neutron, electron. Those are just little light bubbles. And so, in fact, there's a complete connection between us and everything physical, which is why we can stand on a planet, because gravity's pulling us down. It's why our skin's drying out now, because the water's pulling out of our skin and our body's trying to planet. So yeah, that whole connectedness you're talking to is we think of ourselves as solid, and we are almost entirely space. That's why TV rays go through us, radio waves go through us. It's all, we don't even exist except in our own eyeballs and brains.
You're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
both of you.
Bring anybody else joy that the photo that came from 4 billion miles out in outer space was a snowman?
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
see
I didn't either.
And it wasn't obviously, but
Yeah, we sent this thing into space and it's out as,
there
yeah.
it is. Big huge snowman's out there.
All right.
Is that the asteroid that the Pluto New Horizons went by? I never
Yeah,
saw. I should
yeah.
look at that photo.
It's just the
I know it just
shape.
happened
It's
last
the
week.
shape of the
Interesting.
two formed together, but
Yeah.
it's like a snowman.
Yeah.
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 Interesting that we talk about the body and the soul from the position of that third entity.
Yeah. That should tell us something too, right? That there's this soul we're talking about and body we're talking about, but then we're the talking. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, the I. So
Something created as a result of those two pieces that has characteristics and essence that them separately do not possess, or
Yep.
something like that. When you take those electrons and protons and neutrons and you put them together, there's something created that has
Right.
properties that any single one of them did not possess, but because they came together, there's another property. And so the body and the soul coming together create something that separately they do not possess, or
Yeah.
something like that.
and it's not empty space either. You know, when we talk about there's all this space there's energy there. There's measurable energy inside the atom and outside the atom
Yeah.
and all through us. So that gives me a little bit of hope for understanding something, is that energy moves in between everything, and energy exists in all of the atoms of matter. So it's matter energy combo that makes up an atom, I guess we could put it that way. And then how it organizes itself into something. That's also mysterious. So we can look at an atom and all the quarks and all the energy and all the pieces of it, but then how does it pull together and make an entity of something? How does it express itself as a plant or a bug or a cloud or a human being? So I think it's important it kind of gives me a little clue when I think about that energy is something we don't understand very well. And maybe energy and life, whether those are the same thing or not, but the existence of life and the reality of life is also kind of a mystery. And some way in which life animates flesh.
That's the real magic. That is the magic.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just the same electrons that are in every planet and every sun on the whole galaxy. It's all, we're just the same neutrons, electrons, and protons. And that is the magic, is that how that comes together into a self-aware entity. It's like, and it's only on this planet as far as we know, right? There's only another 100 planets that they found that could possibly be at a temperature range that could be supported by water-based life. And that's out of the billions and billions that we're able to look at, you know.
Which seems like a big waste. Like what
Well,
is
it's
that?
Yeah, it's crazy. We're in Disneyland. I mean, that's the way
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
in Disneyland, yeah.
When we were talking about the spaces and the interconnectedness, I remember this. It was a TED Talk that went around about 10 years ago with this woman who experienced a stroke. Remember that? My Stroke of Genius,
Yeah,
I think.
fantastic, yeah.
And I remember watching her. If you haven't heard the story, she's actually a neuroscientist, I think.
Yeah.
And she was by herself, and
She was in a shower, and all of a sudden she couldn't tell the difference between herself and the walls.
she was seeing. Yeah, you explain it because you
I
you have
remember
it more.
quite freshly. Yeah, she just said she just was in the shower and all of a sudden felt weird, and then she said she realized that she actually lost any sense of self and didn't see the boundaries. And other people report the same type of thing. But anyway, and then what's kind of funny about it is then she realizes, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke because of her profession. And then her next thought was very scientific. She got really excited. She goes, oh, I get to study this from the inside out.
Yeah.
I'm going to experience this. But
Yeah.
it took her decades to get speech back and all that. But now she does TED Talks and stuff.
Yeah.
It's really good. But yeah, she had a complete loss of awareness of herself. Yeah, and then she gets into how she made her emergency phone calls. She lost the ability to recognize the patterns on the phone. So she couldn't, when we just see 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, she lost the pattern, and then she explains, and this I won't even try to duplicate because I don't remember it well enough to do on the fly, but yeah, then how she then scientifically figured out how to remember and match a business card with the pattern on the phone and all this stuff.
And then when she tried to talk, she was speaking word salad or something.
The
Yeah.
person on the other end figured out what was going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a really you'll probably learn something from if you listen to it. It'll make you think in some interesting directions.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, Krista was on one of my other walks, and she had done a conference, and she did it with that woman and one other woman, and they had it was an hour and a half of just like, wow.
Yeah.
Krista Tippett interviewed her? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
that was a conference of some sort, and she had that woman and another scientist woman up on stage, and they all talked together, and this woman told her story, and it was just, I'm trying to remember, that was probably in the last year and a half that I listened to that one.
Well, when I heard it, I remember kind of imagining what she was seeing, the way she described it. So I don't know exactly how she described it, but what I remember in my head was that she saw that the edge of our skin is not the edge of our skin. Kind of like the unboundaried nature and the interconnectedness that we have with everything around us. That's what she saw. And I think with her eyes, she didn't just imagine that, because the parts of her brain that organize, what we're seeing were offline, but she still had her eyes. So she was just experiencing raw, like she wasn't symbolizing anything. She was just experiencing what actually is, I think. And it really blew her mind, obviously, that
the I-ness of it went away.
The I-ness went away.
Experience,
Yeah.
The I-ness, the selfness that went away.
Then of course she wrote the book.
Yeah, then she wrote the book.
Really good chronicle.
Have you read it?
I did read most of it. I found it difficult some ways that just didn't suit me, but I think there's a lot of good information there.
Yeah, I liked it because of that phenomenon, that the stroke interrupted her regular way of seeing and making sense out of the world, and instead, Yeah, yeah. We interrupt this program. And then she actually saw, it's sort of like when they talk about drawing, that if you, I have heard this, I don't actually practice this, but that book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, people who are natural artists draw what they see, and they don't symbolize. But we're taught to symbolize things. So if I said, draw a flower, then this. Sorry, I initiated Siri for a second. That's a flower, or a hand or a person. So you get, and you can, if you ask a child to draw something, sometimes they'll just draw what they see. But when at a certain age, like 10 or 11, they start to symbolize like we do, and the left brain takes over, and we do shorthand in our drawing even. And so we symbolize things. That's what we do with words. We take ideas and then we put them into words, which are symbols for ideas, and then we write, which are letters, which are symbols for words. And all of these things are necessary for us to understand things, but it leaves a bunch of stuff out, right? That leaves the whole of it out.
It's like all these cracks.
What's that?
It's like there's all these little cracks here, like where we're getting a lot of it, but there's still little in-between spaces.
Yeah. And I guess my whole thing about the soul is that it's very similar that way. Like maybe when we're all dead and we're all souls interacting in whatever space that there is, heaven or the collective unconscious, or if there even is such a thing, we'll understand what it is to be a soul interacting with the fullness of who we are. But here we have to have, a PR function. We have to have a front office. We have to have symbols, in our personalities in some ways are symbols for our souls. But and then we just think that's all we are. So we either glorify or vilify the symbols of our, and we miss that there's so much more to who we are that we could be actually benefiting from or cooperating with or being in cahoots with.
So that's really interesting because that ties together something that I've heard and something you said in your chapter, which is one of the themes that I see coming out in the readings that I do and the YouTube and the spiritual stuff is that thinking really gets in the way of our connectedness. Because thinking, you have to symbolize, you're dissecting and parceling and categorizing, versus feeling if you get away from the thinking. And thinking can be very perverted, right? I mean,
Yes.
the people can believe anything, no matter how
Yes.
ridiculous to everyone else.
Yep.
And you can honestly believe it and justify it. And the idea is that thinking is very corrupting to that connection to your true self or whatever. Yeah, I've definitely seen that theme floating around more and more.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been my whole thing. When I got to where I couldn't think myself anymore into wellness, let's just put it that way, that kind of shorthands a lot of shit. I couldn't think myself into wellness. And that I realized that my thinking was actually now the problem. What I had picked up as the solution was actually now the problem. And kind of like having the computer virus. You can't fix the thing with the thing that caused the problem. And so I had spent lots of years like spinning around trying to do that, and never really realized that I was trusting my thinking over much. It's good for lots of things, but it can't do everything. And in some ways, it needs to be dethroned. Mm-hmm. But to do that is sort of like prying it out of our, clutching fingers, because we've been taught. We're modern creatures, We've been taught empirical reasoning and logic and information and all of that stuff, which is not bad. It's just when it gets shoehorned into something that it can't serve well, then it ends up being the problem. And
that's really well stated, because I think negativity about our thinking, that we overthink things, that, you know, act from your gut, not from your head, that kind of thing. And I think it's just kind of swinging beyond. I mean, let's not get rid of our thinking. Our thinking serves a purpose, just not for everything, not all the time.
Well, yeah, and a lot of times when we're doing that, when we're saying, yeah, don't think so much, just go with your gut. Well, that's also just reducing it down to some little thing that your head can understand, which leads you into trouble all the time, because your gut can deceive you.
If your gut's too emotion based, yes, right.
Or, I mean, this is why I'm writing this book. It's because we don't understand these things, and we want to reduce it down, but we need to understand some things, and so we're kind of walking a fine line here between, yeah, it's a dance, trying to allow for something without manhandling it with the brain.
Go ahead, Sue.
I think for me, what I have found in truth, especially in the last decade, is, you know, I felt myself get a little defensive about attacking the thinking because I'm a thinker, but I think what's so true for me is that's brought me back to my place of contentment and peace and okay with the world, and trying to stay in sync with myself and the world, is the balance. That the spirit and the mind and the body have got to be balanced for me, and not to deny any of it. And you know, when we got into the neutron and all that stuff, and I like that, and that said a lot to me. But I also think this time of year, what always comes back to me is that the central message of this season is it's good to be human. And the why of it is because it gives us a chance to connect all three things, and to find that balance, that all three are all we need and essential if we can figure out how to honor all three: our mind, our bodies, and our spirits, which is what I would, you know, how I refer to
Yeah,
the soul.
that's another word we could use for soul.
And to relish in that, and not get stuck on one or the other, but to really know that I can't really truly appreciate my spirit and my body without my mind, and how that interreacts. And at first I was thinking that with the spirit and the body, for me it's a tandem thing. It's not one or the other, or one encased in the other, but it's a tandem thing that has to happen in tandem for me. That the body is so important to me for my spirit, and the spirit is so important for my body, that if I let one become stronger than the other, I feel a disconnect that really sets me tumbling. And then my mind, I realize my mind is also very much a part of that, and I get, you know, I kind of get wrapped up sometimes with a lot of thinking, but then how I say, you know, what's worked for me is what's this do for my body, and what's this do for my soul? What's this do for my spirit? And then that connection and that figuring it out into a nice ball instead of all the corners and the makes it work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're kind of getting to the, what difference does it make? So I love the expansion of this conversation because really it's so much more than we think about on a daily basis, right? What if we really did catch that our soul and our body are moving together? Would it make a difference? How much difference would it make? And would it make more difference than we think if we, if I was looking at my hand going, oh, my soul is right there? I don't know. This is why, you know, it's kind of like, stay tuned. When I get this figured out, that will be the next project. But would it? It's certainly in that moment when, and this is another way that the soul speaks sometimes in these flashes of wholeness, like this encapsulated little, clue. And so I experience this, the joy of my whole being, plus the words, the soul is embodied, plus this idea, like this sort of mind-blowing little image of the soul really encompassing, enveloping, infusing, experiencing the world. And then immediately I thought, I guess I've been thinking of it as some chamber, some like protected little chamber inside me somewhere. So I'm still trying to figure out, or I shouldn't use that word because it's figure out. It's a magician word. To really try to live into and experience, how would my life change? And so part of that, the last part of that chapter was what I'm actually trying to deal with when I think about, if I let that settle in, and if I really did truly believe it and not just hold it as this really cool experience I had this one time that I'm going to write about and tell everybody else about, like what if I brought that really close? What kind of changes would I need to make? So then I went on eloquently in that one paragraph about how I would honor and how I would, treat my body well. And then when I thought about actually doing that, I was just like, well, what do I really do? I neglect my body. I don't serve it well. I don't think well of it. I don't like it very much. I don't, feed it well. I don't rest well enough. I don't, I can ride 100 miles in a week on my bike and not stretch, for God's sake, and then wonder why I can hardly walk in the morning, things like that. Like, you should, I can go to a yoga class. I went to a yoga class. I haven't been to yoga in years. I thought I was going to die afterwards. And I felt my back do twingy things in the class. And I thought, she's killed me. And I knew I shouldn't have come, And then I could hardly walk for the rest of the day. It's a little twingy thing that happens sometimes in your lower back. And then I start in on you're not doing it right, and you're not doing, so it all ends up in this noisy, icky kind of space. And so the frontier for me is now that I kind of believe this, that I know this, that's one thing. But pulling it in and actually letting it inform me and letting it affect me, and living my life according to the things that I'm knowing, or realize the first thing I ran into was resistance. I don't want to. I want to be that person, but I don't want to become that person. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I want to have become there.
I want to be there.
Yeah.
I am here. I don't want to go through
Yes.
this.
Right.
And buy a book.
Yeah.
And I think what you shared was really valuable because I think we're still compartmentalizing, the body, the soul, the mind, and it's when the difference it makes is when they are all integrated and you don't recognize whether this is my body or my soul or my mind that is at work here. It's just me, and then you do the things that you don't want to do. It's the do-do verse, right?
The do-do verse.
I don't do
yeah.
The things I don't want to do, I do.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Sitting through this whole discussion, I am really, and I don't have any sort of, journey behind me that would support it. I just don't see myself as three separate entities. I don't at all. So I don't,
You're way ahead of us.
No, that's exactly not it. It's, I just can't separate it, not to that extent anyway.
I think the other is when somebody, go ahead. Well, you go first. I was going to ask her to talk about something.
The thing that has been swirling for me is we're talking in terms of our bodies at this point that are very capable of doing much for us, and and yet there are points where things happen and or disease comes on. The one disease I was thinking in terms of ALS, in which, you know, your body totally, you know, and all you have is your mind and your spirit, and when you start, I mean, as you try and infuse, and aging would do some of that same stuff also, but as you, it has to fuse if you still are moving towards growth all the way to the end. That you have to let this body part go, but become whatever it is within you. And the more we can do that now and let it go, I think you just become more still, more calm, content, more.
You were missing the words, aren't
I'm
we?
missing the
Yeah,
words,
we're missing
yeah.
the
I
words
mean,
to try to.
I just feel like sometimes when people face those things, either early or whatever, and what comes out of that is many times great beauty of life, of how that life is lived, or how they're thinking, or what goes on, or the, you know. But I think it's still a fusing, even if the body's not in perfect shape. It's still that fusing that is what it would be lovely to try and have.
Yeah, I'm just still struck with the possibilities. Oh, sorry, because you were gonna say something. Okay, with the possibility, like the possibility of what my body has to say to me about my spirit, or about spirituality, or the enlightenment that might come through the knowledge that my body holds, because it's infused by the soul, and I just don't think of it as a language through which I listen, you know? So I'm kind of excited by the possibilities that, you know, somehow, and people are trying to do that all over the place. There's a woman, her name is Mona Lisa Schultz. She's a medical intuitive, which I think is a very strange thing. Like, she is an MD, but she experiences other people's bodies intuitively, and she connects ailments in the body to psychological, spiritual kinds of things. And it just sort of blew my mind when I started to read it. So I was like, no, I can't go there, because people will line those up, you know, for you without any problem. You know, so if you're angry, if you have bitterness, you have cancer. You know, those kinds of simplistic things like that. So you better not be bitter. So anyway, that's all. Is that all I wanted to say? Probably.
I just wanted to hear you talk about what followed that experience where the acupuncturist said, your body is really joyful, but you try to make it calm, and that makes you really sad. What happened next? Can you talk more about that?
I went, huh. And I thought, well, I should be more joyful. So this was like 2002 or 3 or 4. It's probably 2004. So I kind of went tilt like that, because it felt like a real one of those moments, you know, where something real is being spoken. It felt kind of, the words I would have used 20 years ago felt prophetic to me. You are a joyful person, but you have made yourself calm, and your body is very sad about this. And I just went, there's nothing more true than that. And yet, so then I thought, well, I should try to be more joyful, which is the magician's answer to a spiritual problem. And so I kind of wrote about it. I thought about it. I'm like, joy is the thing. Yeah. Joy, you know. And then a couple of years later, I was depressed. You know, I went into, not because of that, but, you know, life took over, and I had
really sad.
my body got super sad, and probably gained another 20, 30 pounds as a result of being that sad. You know, it was a whole life fail completely, you know, and I've talked to you guys a lot about that. So I kind of lost the train, when you have space, you can say, I should be more joyful, but when you're crashing, then some of those thoughts are not, you just can't afford anymore. So I settled for not being depressed. So that's where I showed up. That was the yoga studio guy. So I showed up at acupuncture just glad that I wasn't drowning anymore. Just glad that I wasn't feeling, that I was not crying every day, that I was working, that I was, doing my thing. And that I'd gotten through the really angry, hard, thrashing part of my faith crisis. So I was kind of at a here, but it was more like here. You know what I'm saying? Just grateful not to be in bad shape. And so that's not the same as being alive. So now, I mean, it's one of those things where when you get a piece of truth that, and I'll get more into that hopefully as we talk about how to actually listen to the soul, what things to pay attention to and what to do with them is kind of what you're asking. I think I'm calling the competency as gathering the artifacts, that the ways that your soul speaks to you or the experiences that you have that have a certain resonance of soul to them. What I did with a lot of those things was just to kind of hold it like this, knowing that if I try to dissect it, I'm going to wreck it. I can't force it. It needs to tell me its truth, kind of. And I can't really ignore it either, but I don't quite know what to do. So I had this sort of basket I put these things in. That's kind of how I track the movements of the soul. It's like you can go back to the past and probably collect some things, invitations that your soul has given you, things that you've learned, that had resonance to them. They're probably there. And you just kind of collect them gently, stick them in your basket. Don't try to squeeze them or force something out of it, but don't lose them either. So collect them in the basket of artifacts. And then kind of keep your ear cocked a little bit in case it wants to tell you something. This sounds so stupid. But that's exactly the process. And so in that moment, that's what I did. I was like, and then I tried to squeeze it. I tried to work it, but it really didn't do anything. Then I crashed. Then I came back. Then I started thinking, collecting my artifacts, and that was one of them. And so I need to know about myself that it's possible, that my true nature is joyful. And I almost think that everybody's true nature is joyful. I kind of think that a joy is the best expression of the soul. Yeah. It's the natural state of childhood and the soul.
What I've been thinking is, what difference does it make? And if to me it's this experience or being of, this is amazing. Of
wonder, awe.
And so what difference does it make when you're in that state, that complete, like, wow, joyful, you're trusting, you're open, you're connecting, you're living in such a fullness that you go, I don't want to lose this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think the difference is making, is just this a way of living. And you don't just, it's like, I don't want to put it in my basket just for New Year's Eve or just
right.
special times.
I want to live like that all the time.
I want to be in this state as much as I can.
Yeah.
Because I'm living, I'm being, I'm connecting, and I'm trusting in everything.
Me too.
So keep writing that book.
Because, damn it. Okay. We'll give you a recipe. Okay, what are we doing? Okay, we have like 5 minutes.
Well, I also want to appreciate what you were able to say about, you don't experience yourself or think of the separateness of mind, body, spirit, and yet still your experience of life is very similar to everyone else. And so what's that telling us?
It's
also?
like a model. We come up with some models so we can understand how we function in the world, how the world is. But it's kind of like a energy continuous for me, from matter to energy without particles and everything in between. But yeah, it's just a model that we come up with so we can make order of our experiences. and the models that exist in everybody's minds are just very illustrative for everybody because they show some other aspect.
And somehow we have to have them so we can try to communicate.
Yeah. Well, also, as I think about this all the time, I keep thinking about it. We're really all about an integrative process. So human development and growth is all about integration. So integration means that we have all these different parts and they need to be identified. So for me, I had all these different parts that I was ignorant of, was not in touch with. So my growth had to do with, oh, I have this. Oh, there's that. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. So identifying and distinguishing the parts. But then for most of us in adulthood, we experience ourselves in very disjointed ways. Like I'm crazy, or I'm wise, or I'm stupid, or I'm brilliant, all these different, and it's confusing to be in relationship with people who show such brilliance on the one hand and such ridiculosity on the other. You know what you're talking about, right? So our growth has to do with those parts coming to life, but they're disjointed and not connected. And so emotional health, psychological health, is about pulling those pieces together in some kind of meaningful way, allowing them all to be there, and then connecting them with something. So like in the words of Richard Rohr, everything belongs. So that's one of the things. So I used to think not everything belongs, only certain things can belong, and the rest need to be banished. Then I'm living in a disintegrated way. I might be highly developed over here in these ways, but these other parts that I did not allow are there with me. I can't get rid of them, but they're there and they're in the dark. They're in the shadow, but they will not be quiet, so they don't go away. So they show up and they interrupt my life and they make things. And I experience myself as disjointed or disintegrated. And so all of these very elaborate explanations of things, and particularly the piece about the soul being there in some wise and guiding way, helps me personally to pull those things together in a meaningful way. And maybe that's all I'm doing. And so you don't have to go this way to get there. You could be more integrated in a different way. But this is sort of the way that works for me and helps me to be more at one with myself, or a more integrated human being. And so maybe that's just an easier way to talk about it.
Before we wrap up, could some people share maybe some of their practices or things they
That's a good idea.
Help in this integration process? I'd love to hear just what different people do.
I would too.
I'm really trying to figure out what I do, so I'd love other ideas.
I would too.
One thing that I do, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, one thing my therapist has taught me to, when I identify some distressing feeling I'm having, I can locate a memory or an experience in my childhood, go back and nurture myself, give myself the words and the parenting really that I didn't get, and really work through that current state of distress that I'm in now. But I do this all the time where I'm going back and parenting. But when I think about the body, I just realized I think I'm doing some of the same things with my body, because when I think about how I was as a child, I loved being in my body. I was an athlete. I had a pretty decent experience, and I loved being outside. I loved nature. I was outside as much as I could be. And it dawned on me later in life that I haven't spent enough time outdoors, that trees speak to me, that I literally just want the sky above my head and not a roof all the time.
Yeah.
And that gets me, I think, in touch with something that's very primal for me, just being outdoors, and discovering biking in the last, really discovering in the last year. just engaging with myself in a very physical way, I really think is also drawing upon what was good about childhood and what I loved, like paying attention to what I loved as a kid, and not just kind of from my religious training, like thinking that the body is, it's all going to burn anyway. It's something, I don't believe that. I think so. So just really paying attention, and I went snowshoeing a couple weeks ago with Suzanne, and it was so bitter cold, but just my experience was completely enveloped in snowshoeing, and getting away, being able to, the thinking even that I'm doing at that time is just around the activity and what my body is going through. That puts me in touch with my soul. So that's some of the stuff that I experienced.
Yeah.
I actually want to piggyback off of that because I have a similar experience when I'm outside, and that's when I've always felt so connected to God. And I think what I've recognized more recently is I don't picture my soul as this disembodied spirit, but I picture my soul as the mountains and the ocean and the sky. And so within myself is all of the ways that I connect with God out there. And it is just as much of an experience and an adventure, and it's wild in your soul in the way that it is outdoors.
Oh my gosh,
So
I love
really
that so
connect
much.
with what you said, because that's so similar to how I take that in as well. And it took putting that within me to recognize how to go within myself, because I don't know if I just picture it as some wispy spirit or something. It's that's not interesting.
It's not very interesting.
If I picture it as the mountains and the ocean and the things that I love and am drawn towards, then there's hardship in that. There's discovery. There's adventure. There's connection, and that also connects me, my insides, kind of like what you were saying, with everything around us in a very in a way I can actually picture and understand. So yeah, I get that.
Gonna steal that. It's after time, so I hate to always just go here and go, okay, we're done, without a lovely sort of wrap up. But I really appreciate all of your presence and attention, and all of the great things that you shared. So thank you. See you next time.